Meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. And I'm glad to get to see the faces. I was glad to hear the eavesdrop on your conversations because I could hear everything. Fortunately, you didn't say anything bad about me. But let's see. Tanya, will you call the roll for the record, please, ma'am?
Yes, I will. Nicole Alvarez?
Here.
Travis Bailey?
Here.
Ian Dunn?
Here.
Nick Fountain?
Here.
John Henshaw?
He's muted.
And sorry, I've got the list up. Did John? Okay, I see you, John. For the record, John's muted, but he's there. Laurie Jackson?
Here.
Heather Leah?
Here.
Janine said she'd be late. Or Katie Pate?
Here.
Jimmy Team?
Here.
Kay Webb?
Here.
Gaston Williams?
Here.
And Janine is here. All right, Janine McAuliffe. All right, we're all here.
So the next thing is approval of the minutes from February 18. Did anybody look at that? If one of you will raise your hand and say you make a motion to approve, that will be a good thing. I'll call on you verbally. All right, John.
I'll move to approve the minutes from February 2020.
And I have a second.
Second, Travis Bailey.
All right, thank you, Travis. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? There were no corrections? All right, so the minutes are carried, and the first thing we got on the agenda today is a subdivision, 542 East Jones Street, and I think we have some speakers here about that, but if staff would explain the proposal first.
Yes. Oops. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so you can have something to look at. Just one moment, please. Okay, and Ray, if you could unmute Colette on that, please.
I'm here. Hey,
You are here. Okay.
So you are reviewing a subdivision. It has been a very long time since the last time you reviewed a subdivision. So to give you a little bit of guidance before we talk about this.
You move closer to your microphone, please.
Can you speak up?
In this review, can you hear me?
No, you're really quiet, Colette.
Okay, is that any better?
Yeah, that's better.
All right, your role in this review is to look at the proposed subdivision and make a recommendation on the proposed new lots. Once you make your recommendation, the request will then be taken to City Council for final decision. And in your review, what you're looking at is whether the in the buildable portion will be congruous with the character of the district.
Could you repeat that again, please, Colette?
We can't hear you, Colette.
Yeah, it was super quiet.
Can you hear me now?
A little
Yes.
better.
A little better.
There's some background noise coming from somebody's microphone.
Construction work.
Is that better?
Yes, you're almost going to need to yell in it.
Okay, so at what point would you want me to start over?
What
Right.
the point? Oh,
Yeah, if you just run through quickly, so this the red box on the screen and they want to divide it, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Who is to speak first?
I think we have another slide here.
Okay.
Here's the proposed subdivision. And what I'd like to hear is actually what I didn't hear is what y'all are looking at when you do the review. If you could say that again, please, Colette.
So you are looking at the proposed buildable portions of the new lot and determining whether or not the proposed lots will be congruous with the developmental character of the historic district. In the new lot, is it possible for buildings that are not incongruous with the special character of Oakwood to be built?
All right.
Okay. And for the applicants today, we've got Karen Still and Ashley Morris. And I'm not sure which one of those wants to speak first. So I guess, Ray, if you could unmute both of them, that would be awesome.
Okay, Ashley, are you going to speak or is it going to be Karen?
Let's see. I'll let Karen go first.
All right. Staff, can you put the picture of the, while Karen is speaking, could we be looking at the proposed new lots? All right, Karen, go ahead. We're glad to have you this morning. Sorry that we're having to do this in such complicated fashion, but we'll move on.
Thank you, Nick. This is the way life is. We've been on lots and lots of these kinds of meetings, so we really appreciate the fact that you all have gotten together today. Can you hear me all right?
There's a lot of feedback for some reason.
We really don't have much to say. We attended a meeting back in the fall. We made our subdivision application in October of 2019. And we have a double wide, double deep lot in historic Oakwood that we would like to subdivide. And so that's our application. We're available for questions. We don't really have a presentation to make. I think the application says what it needs to say.
Okay. Well, Karen, if you or Ashley one would answer this, and if the rest of you will. Right now, I don't have a view where I see all of you readily because I got this side by side on, but we'll find a way to get the questions from everyone else. But will you explain to me, is it the idea that the new lot number 2 would front on Mosley Lane?
That's correct.
And the remainder of the original would still front on Jones Street, right?
That's correct. The original lot number 1, will remain exactly the same. Nothing there changes.
And is that an existing structure?
It is. It's an 1876 home.
Okay. And tell me roughly what are the dimensions of the new lot 2?
It appears to be, it's roughly, I think, 88 deep and 60 across.
Okay. All right. Who else would like to be heard? And let's see, how do I figure out who that is?
I saw Gaston, I saw Jimmy raise their hands.
Okay, Gaston, how about you go first?
Just very quickly, it's probably a question as much for the staff as any. Given where this is located between Jones and the Mosley Abbott Lane, are there any other deep lots like this that have already been divided?
There is one that was subdivided, about 15, well, somewhere between roughly 15 years ago, that is further to the east. And it was shortly thereafter that this review process was put into place. And there was a message, and I was asked to move forward in the application to this page, I think. Can y'all see that?
The last page in the panel of exhibits.
Right.
All right, so this is not a case of first impression for this particular block.
It's not, but it's no, this is not. The first was again, when the first subdivision was put into place roughly 15 years ago. It was after that there was a text change that allowed for a review of subdivisions. The other piece I want to point in the historic overlay district by our HDC, the other thing I want to point out is that as you know, anything that would be built on the lot would be subject to the certificate of appropriateness process.
Right. And so, Tanya, let me ask this. So Mosley Lane was cut in or extended further back into the center of the block a number of years ago, which essentially is what caused this text change to be created.
No, the subdivision, I mean, the Mosley Lane, that was there for a long time. It was the subdivision of the lot on Jones Street that backed onto Mosley that brought about the text change.
Okay, thank you for correcting me. Let's see, Jimmy, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yes. My curiosity is with regard to the depth of the lot. As I understand from the earlier presentation by Colette, that there was a question about the new lot fitting in with the neighborhood. So either staff or applicant, can you speak to the depth of this lot relative to other lots in the district?
This is Ashley Morris. I can talk about that. I did the plan that we're looking at right now, and it's pretty comparative to a lot of the bungalow. I actually took a lot of the plans that I've worked on throughout Oakwood just to drop it onto the site, just to see if they would fit. And most of them would, between 1,200 to 1,600 square feet. It could go a little bit bigger if we didn't have the driveway. But most lots are between probably 60 to 100 feet for the bungalows that I've seen.
Is that 60 feet that you're referring to the depth of the lot or the width?
I'm sorry, to the depth. It's actually pretty wide for an Oakwood lot, but the depth is pretty typical for more of a bungalow style house in Oakwood.
And have you done any calculations on the impact of a developed area for what the drawing you showed was?
Can you further the question? Sorry.
Well, actually, if you were at the COA meeting, you'd be talking about lot coverage.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy is anticipating whether you're going to end up with a problem at the COA meeting.
Oh, okay. So when you talk about mass to open space, is that what you're referring to, Jimmy?
Yes.
Yes, if you were to create, if the whole lot if that was an addition onto the house, yes. But since the lot is being subdivided, I think we're going to be more at probably 50%, maybe to 65%, which is the max for R10.
Okay. Are there other questions? Tanya, do you see other people with their hands up?
I can see all the commissioners. I don't at the moment, but we do have some folks
Yes, I know.
that also
I have
wish to
that.
speak.
I have down that Mandy Locke, Missy Blackman, and Amber Nimitz wanted to speak. I don't know who needed to be first, but I wanted to see if anybody had any more questions for Karen or Ashley Marsh. Hearing none, we'll move to hear from the other folks. I think Mandy was first to volunteer to speak. So, Ms. Locke, we'll be glad to hear from you at this time.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you.
Great. Good morning. My name is Mandy Locke, and I live at 532 Mosley Lane, which is about 15 feet from the proposed subdivision. I've lived there for 13 years. To start, I'd like to say two things. I regret speaking against a neighbor's dreams. That's uncomfortable. And I hope that if they prevail, they can count on me to be a good neighbor. Second, despite having been in touch with this city about my concerns about the subdivision since last fall, I only learned of this hearing late yesterday afternoon. As such, I didn't have adequate time to alert all the neighbors who've expressed concerns to me. I ask that you continue the hearing or at least keep the matter open to accept more comments into the record in the days to come. As best I understand the purview of the commission, you're charged with ensuring the proposal fits within the character of Oakwood. I argue that it does not. By approving the subdivision, you're paving the way for a home. The row of homes facing Jones Street and backing up to Mosley Lane have deep yards filled with greenery often associated with Oakwood. No other home has been built on a parcel facing Mosley Lane. Currently, homes are only on the south side of the street. But this decision stands to change the character and future of another neighborhood, Hungry Neck. If you grant this request, you are allowing a piece of Oakwood to effectively join another neighborhood. Before you do that, I want to tell you a little bit about my neighborhood. Hungry Neck subdivision, of which Mosley Lane is the largest part, was created by the city in the late 1990s. The city took the land by eminent domain, paying off hundreds of heirs with a stake in the property. This subdivision was among the city's first efforts to use infill development as a way to create modest workforce housing close to the city center. The homes were initially deed restricted and income qualified. Mosley Lane is lined with 1,000 and 1,600 square foot homes. A row of 1,000 square foot homes, bungalows specifically, face what would now be the new lot proposed. Many days, Mosley Lane seems like a sleepy little street, a hidden treasure tucked between the busy throughways of Jones and Edenton streets. Kids play on our street. They've erected a basketball court in the cul-de-sac. Trees grow over the street, casting shade over a narrow through road. Over the years, though, more and more traffic has been drawn to the street. Because of parked cars, only one car can pass at a time. A few times, delivery trucks have been unable to maneuver down the street at all. We have parking and traffic concerns, none of which may be the concern of the commission. And I know you have no control over precedents in future development, but we worry other neighbors on Jones Street will follow this lead and create additional lots on Mosley Lane. 2 cars by 2 cars, 1 family by 1 family quickly adds up. I know these might seem like small concerns in the scheme of all you consider on a daily basis, but for the 12 families who make a home on Mosley Lane, these are safety and quality of life concerns of big consequence. By allowing the subdivision, you're allowing a piece of a historic district to effectively become part of an already established neighborhood. I believe that chopping up the yards is not in character of Oakwood, nor is offloading further density into an already dense street. I thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Locke. I appreciate your comments, and I hear expressing concern about traffic issues. It was the main thing from the standpoint of things that we probably have to look at. And I also heard your concerns with regard to your notice, but I assure you that the way we will have to decide this matter won't be based on whether there was a big crowd or a small crowd. We're going to be trying to look at the neighborhood, not at the audience, to decide what is the right thing to do here. So I wanted to reassure you that it isn't about how many people you brought. Okay?
Thank you.
So, does anyone want to say anything on with regard to this speaker before I move to the next? Anyone on the commission? All right, I didn't hear anything back or see anything, so I'll call on Miss Blackburn next. Missy Blackburn.
Can you hear me okay?
You're coming in and out. Keep talking. Let's see if it picks up.
Okay,
Right.
can you hear me better now?
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, I don't have a ton to add. I'm at 528 Mosley Lane, so also directly across the street, and definitely echo a lot of what Mandy said. And I did want to understand more in moving forward with traffic flow. I know I did some work on my house last year, and I mean, like she mentioned, like we can't have more than one car at a time down the street. And my, little bit of parking would be directly across from it. So, you could not have two cars parked on opposite sides of the street and have traffic get through. Often when I had the renovation last year, if I had a truck out front doing something, it would have to move for someone to get down the street who needed to leave. Since we're a dead end street, it gets really tricky as far as getting through. So, I've lived in my house for 8 years as well. And our street is just obviously much more narrow than other streets I noticed when I'm throughout Oakwood. So I was hoping to understand that better, how that would work.
I'm not sure I have the answer to that question, Ms. Blackburn, but tell me, how does a fire truck get in there?
They have before, yes. I think it comes if you have a car parked on one side of the street, additional people can get down the street. But if you have two sides, it's really impossible on our street.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Then we'll hear from Miss Nemec, Amber Nemec.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to second Mandy's comments about the children on the street and playing in the cul-de-sac. We have a lot of kids actually for the number of houses we have, and it gets you would think that we wouldn't have that much traffic because of it being a cul-de-sac, but it does get very busy, and the more kids that we see on the street, the more worried I become about the level of traffic. And that would be my main concern, in addition to the concerns that Mandy and Missy have voiced. I live at 504 Mosley, which is at the end of the cul-de-sac.
Thank you, Ms. Nemec. I was getting ready to ask your address so we would have that. Okay. Is anybody else? Anybody have questions for Ms. Nemec? All right, then I think the process is for us to have discussion internally and decide what to do with it. Gaston, did you raise your hand, or were you just checking to see your ear was still there?
Both. My ear's here, and I do have a quick question. It might be for the staff or the participants. I'm just trying to imagine the position of the two streets. Mosley, are there any other homes that face Jones that park their cars in a parking pad or otherwise at the back of their lot that comes off Mosley? Does that make sense? In other words, are some people using Mosley as an alley to park their cars behind their residence on Jones?
Staff, can y'all answer that question for us?
No, I'm not sure where folks are parking. I can pull up the IMAP so you can get a better idea of how the two streets sit together. If you can give me a moment, would that help?
Well, the map might indicate whether there are garages to the rear or anything.
This is Aaron. This is Aaron speaking. I have IMAPs up currently. Before we get into that, I wanted to point out that we have one more neighbor, Louise Farmer, who's joined the call and would like to speak.
All right. That's fine. Then let's hear from Ms. Farmer. And Ms. Farmer, if you'll give us your address as well.
At 520 Mosley, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, I've lived here since 2000 when my house was first built. And I also have concerns for the children, for the quality of the neighborhood, and also for emergency vehicles being able to get through our street. It's just so narrow. I don't see how, if we have a house that's facing Mosley with any kind of parking on the street, it's going to be impossible. So I have the same concerns that all my other neighbors have expressed. And also the idea that once one home is built like that, there could be others. And much as I love having lots of neighbors, I just don't think it will be good for the quality of Mosley Lane.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. I have a question for staff. Explain again to us the process. Do we advise what our opinion is or take action and then it goes to the planning commission, or what happens?
After this, then your recommendation goes, will ultimately make it to city council. This does not go to the planning commission. Your recommendation will be provided to the city staff in the planning and development department that shepherd and who not on preservation staff, but elsewhere in the department, and they will gather that information along with comments and from all of the other reviewing departments, and that will go to city council, which will be heard and decided in a quasi-judicial hearing at a future date.
All right. So with that, I think we need to have questions and comments and discussion from members of the commission.
Do you want to see the map real quick?
Yes, the map would be good so that we have that perspective and answer Gaston's question.
I was just going to say, this is Laurie Jackson. On iMaps or in Street View, it does look like two of the properties fronting East Jones have rear access. Looks like the two lots to the west of the property we are reviewing.
Right.
Two lots to the east, right?
Sorry, yes.
So can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So two lots to the right or east of this lot is a driveway coming up into the rear of a house that's no doubt fronts on Jones.
Right. And the one directly beside the lot we're considering has a chain link fence, and it also looks like there's a drive access there. It's not used in quite the same way, but.
Okay.
And to just.
Right, thank you for that. If we can have the view which allows us to see each other, that will help move this discussion, I think. Now then, discussion from the rest of you.
I see Jimmy's hand.
All right, Jimmy. I don't know why I'm not seeing the hand.
Just a couple of things to make sure I'm clear about the decision-making process. Mosley Lane is technically outside of the district. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so the way this was introduced was the question, what I understood what the question was, is the new lot, does it fall in with the what would be able to accommodate a new residence that would be in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let me follow up with Jimmy's question, Tanya. The houses on Mosley that are on the other side of the street, are they in Oakwood? Are they regulated by us?
No, they are not. I don't. I can pull that map up again. That shows the
that's
boundary.
fine. That's what I thought, that the houses on Mosley are not in the district, and that means that, to Jimmy's point, the back half of this house on Jones, the back half of this proposed lot is a regulated space, and so my question then is, we are to evaluate this in the context of conformity with the district, maybe not necessarily in conformity with Mosley.
Correct. So you are looking at this to imagine, could a structure, a building, use regardless, be built that could obtain a certificate of appropriateness? Could something be built on the new lot that would be congruous with the character of the historic overlay district? That is how you're looking at this.
Right. Okay. So I think that clarifies things a little bit. Mr. Team, does that answer your question?
Well, I just want to acknowledge the other attendees, applicant, who spoke to issues about the development, and I think that's a point that I just wanted to make sure was clear for everyone, that we only look at it from the district standpoint, that issues with regard to subdivision, traffic, and so forth, even if it was in the district, we wouldn't be being able to make decisions about traffic. Those are other planning issues that have to be dealt with either through the planning or engineering department. And so this is an interesting situation. I mean, I think this is a one-off for me, I know. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure everybody understood what we could decide on and what we can't make a decision on. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Gaston, anything else from you?
I see Kay's hand.
All right. I'm gonna call on Kay, and then I'm gonna work my way down the roster so that I know whether each person has anything to say or not. Okay, you go ahead.
Do we give any consideration to what effect the subdivision will have on the original lot? In other words, I'm talking about the coverage area. So if you cut it in half, will the original lot then still be congruous because it's covering more than 75% of the lot? Or is that something we have a consideration for?
Well, I do think that we should look at that, Kay, because once the lot is created, it is created. And I don't know that the original house would be non-conforming in any way, but it might be problematical in terms of lot coverage for us going down the road.
I'd like to speak to that too. So you're looking at, both. You are looking at both lots, and whatever recommendation that you make, that can go along with any comments you have. Say you recommend approval because of this, you recommend disapproval because of this, and we can make sure that gets fed.
All right, great. Okay, with that said, then I'm going to go down the roster the way it appears on my screen. So after Gaston, the next name on my list is Heather. So Heather, what are your thoughts, questions, and comments?
I'm still just listening and absorbing.
All right, thanks. Ian?
I think most of my questions have been answered. I do have concerns about the proportion of built space and concerns about traffic, but as you said, that we don't really have any control over that. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
All right. Janine McAuliffe?
Janine, you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My concerns are about lot coverage for both those lots, and beyond that, I don't have issues. So that's kind of where I'm focused.
Okay. Jimmy Team, anything else?
I think considering the fact that we've got a number of questions on lot coverage, the new lot, I guess the issue is, yes, there was a drawing that was done, but that really doesn't have any validity in terms of the subdivision. And this may be a question to Tanya, but we're really not in a position to put a stipulation on the approval of the new lot as to a limitation on lot coverage, are we?
Correct. Anything like that will come in a certificate of appropriateness.
Okay, right. And we're not obligated, because a proposed idea of what would be put on the plan is not something that we are committing ourselves to later on. If we found, for instance, that something was similar to that plan with a lot coverage that we felt was inappropriate, that we would not be in a position or obligated to accept that plan that was shown today. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. John Henshaw.
No, my concerns are pretty much what would be coverage, massing. So, we've pretty much discussed those.
Okay. Katie Pate.
Hey there. Yeah, I agree about the concerns of lot coverage. And I think the neighbors have valid concerns, and I appreciate them joining this meeting to speak, but unfortunately don't have much control over the parking issues, but I think those are valid concerns.
Right. Okay. Kay Webb, you already spoke. You got any other question at this point?
Well, no, just my concern is if we approve the subdivision, then what effect does that have on the lot coverage of the original lot? So if they don't ever try and do anything else to the original lot, they wouldn't be coming before the certificate of appropriateness committee. And so how would that issue come up that it's non-conforming, if it is non-conforming?
It certainly would have an impact on what any future owner of that particular house might be able to do compared to now. But obviously, these folks have made a judgment on whatever grounds that they're better off with a separate lot. And I'll come back to it. I want to hear from everybody else first, but I want to try to see, do we know what the lot coverage of with respect to the original historic structure would now be on the proposed new shorter lot? I'll come back to that. I'm going to ask Laurie Jackson now if she has comments or questions.
I think I again concur with the concerns of the neighbors and also the other commissioners. if I look at it strictly in terms of could something be built on this lot that would be compatible with the district, I think that answer is yes. Hearing from Ashley Hinkle Morris earlier, I mean, I think that the sizes are similar to other lot sizes in the district. You know, I can't speak to transportation or emergency vehicles, but if I look at it strictly in terms of the historic district, I would be inclined to say I would approve this.
Okay, Nicole Alvarez.
Well said, Lori. I agree in looking at it strictly from the historic perspective. I'm really looking at lot 1 and wondering about the character of both the lot and of the house. It sounds like with the house, since we'll be able to review the design of that goes on to lot 2, we'll have some control to make sure that it's not overpowering or negatively affecting the house on lot 1. As far as the character of the site, I know, of course, there is an effect on that. I don't know if there's anything there that's significant, like a very large tree, or anything like that. So that could be just a question that we could go down. But otherwise, I don't see a negative effect to the historic district itself, and the changes that would be coming, we could still review and have a say to make sure that it's still compatible. So I'm inclined to approve this.
Travis Bailey.
No additional comments other than what was raised by previous commissioner comments.
Okay. All right. Is there a further discussion among any of you? Does anyone have or is anyone, all right, Gaston, I see your hand.
Sorry, I didn't speak quick enough earlier with my microphone on. I was looking at a satellite view just now. I don't know the time reference, but I'm looking at this bigger lot that goes between Eaton and East Jones and Swain and Northeast Street. And looking at Mosley Lane, I know we don't consider that, but I was just thinking forward. If this goes through the subdivision and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 possibly other lots that could be similarly subdivided, I know that Mosley's not, the houses on Mosley facing east, I guess, are not considered, but it will significantly stress Mosley and change the nature of this quadrant of this block by doubling the houses in this one little quadrant, which is on the screen, upper right-hand side, where all the houses face East Jones. They back to Mosley. Some of the lots being used as a parking lot or whatever, but now we're going to have full houses and full complements of their related cars. So we do change the nature of the historic district, I think, because we're doubling the density in this quadrant. And I don't know what's going to happen to the trees, not relevant to our thing so much, but this is a heavily, this is otherwise single family homes with deep lots backing onto Mosley. It'll significantly impact Mosley. I don't know how they're going to create enough space to get vehicles down there, because you can't really access those houses on Mosley unless you go through the yards of the houses on Eaton. I'm just thinking, moving forward, if they develop out the whole 5 houses, 6 houses in this row, it's going to create a real problem going forward. That's just my observation. I would be opposed.
All right, well, let me try it this way. Because this is a different, this kind of task is a little bit more like a COA process for those of us on various committees than it is like research or some of the other things. So I'm sort of looking for a motion from somebody who is used to putting these things together or thinking about the factors that ought to be in the motion. And so Mr. Team or Ms. Jackson or Ian Dunn, maybe one of you will try a motion here because we've got a lot of other stuff to move on this agenda.
May I make a quick interjection? Oh, sorry, Jimmy, you first, Commissioner Person.
Well, I heard a comment from one of the presenters with regard to just having learned of the project. There were other people who wanted to speak. And so my question, and this maybe goes to staff, is that were there some challenges around making the vicinity aware of this, that we find ourselves in a place of looking like we're trying to expedite this without hearing the input from other people?
So with this kind of review, there's no special notification. It's simply placed on the agenda, and then goes forward to City Council. The delay was simply staff remembering that we had been reached out to by a neighbor, and I will say I regret that was not me. That was one of my other fine staff. And so as soon as there was a recollection, she went through the emails and reached out. But from a notification standpoint, there is not in this process at all. It's simply placed on the agenda. You're not making a decision. And that's the other piece I wanted to point out, that RHDC is not approving or disapproving. You're making a recommendation that will then go to City Council, and at which point that's where the decision will be made, and there will be additional notifications at that point. So
is it, Nick, if I can for a second, I want to continue to follow for a second. So is it inappropriate for us to comment, because I see this in two pieces. For me, it looks like, from everything I've heard, that it fits in within the context of the historic district, and that it is approvable. There are legitimate concerns that presenters had which are beyond our bounds. Is it appropriate in our comments to note both those things?
I think that we can have the motion say that we don't take a position on the traffic or emergency access, or those factors that are not part of our guidelines in the district. If we want.
Well, on that basis, I'll make a motion that we, based on our review, that the subdivision creates lots that have the potential to, or at least the new lot has the potential to be developed within the context of the guidelines, and that the existing lot also is in the context of the existing guidelines, and then noting that there was testimony which addressed traffic and safety issues on Mosley Lane that is out of our purview, but that we would suggest that the city also consider those concerns as part of their final approval.
So after all that preamble, are you making a motion to approve?
It was a motion. I understood we're not approving. We're just making a recommendation.
But the recommendation would be to approve, but that those factors need consideration and were not part of our recommendation.
So again, I'm going to ask, I understood that we were not making a motion to approve. We were just making comment.
You are making a recommendation. You're making a decision on, in the judgment of RHDC, would this subdivided lots, could something be built that would meet that would be in keeping with the design guidelines and in character with the development character of Oakwood. I'm going to add in really quickly that there's been some background messaging that there may be some of the attendees and or applicants that may have that want to speak more. That is just letting you know. That is up to you, Mr. Fountain.
Well, I think my sense of it is that we have the picture of what the issues are before us. And but Mr. Team, I take it that your motion ultimately is to recommend approval. But given that but that we don't have control over certain of those factors that council will need to look at.
Well, again, I'm struggling around recommend approval versus the language of recommend vision would allow certain things to happen. And I think so. I'm going to withdraw my motion, allow someone else to make a motion.
All right. Laurie, you want to try a motion?
Yes, I'll try. I move that we make the recommendation that based on the guidelines, the proposed subdivision, or rather the proposed additional lot could be developed in a way that was compatible with the district. So maybe I'll leave it at that, and then we can take some friendly amendments. Nick?
All right. We need a second to that motion. If someone will raise their hand, and Tanya, tell me if you see them.
Nicole.
Nicole Alvarez, you second the motion?
Yes, I second.
Is that a yes?
She said yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we have a motion and a second, and we can look at, and this is for discussion, we can look at the question whether there needs to be a sentence added to the motion, making clear that we are not taking into account the traffic and emergency access issues that might bear on Mosley Lane. And Laurie, I see you nodding. Are you okay to add a sentence along that line to your motion?
Yes.
Okay, now, so the rest of you, you've heard the motion is that it be recommended for approval insofar as our Oakwood guidelines are concerned, but we outline this area that we're not, that we don't feel that we can take into account, so that the city council is clearly aware of where we were on that issue. That said, I'll go down the roll again. Does anybody have any further discussion before we vote on this? Gaston, you have anything to say?
No.
Heather, you got anything to say? Now, I'm not asking for a yes or no on the motion right now. I want to be sure there's no discussion.
Nothing to say.
Okay, Ian Dunn?
No.
Jenny McAuliffe?
No.
Jimmy Team?
No.
John Henshaw?
No.
Katie Pate?
No.
Hey Webb?
No, I'm not clear from staff whether, well, no, I guess, no, never mind, no.
All right, and Laurie and Nicole were okay as it was. Travis Bailey?
Not to draw out this discussion item, but should we also add a friendly amendment that by creating the subdivision, it may cause the original lot and building to be incongruous with our standards due to building mass on the lot?
I don't think that amendment is consistent with what Laurie said, but it may, I mean, you may be right, but I'm not sure that's consistent with her motion. So if that's your proposal for a modification to the motion, I think I'll ask Laurie whether she accepts that that proposed amendment.
I think, and staff would have to confirm this, but just by looking at the lot sizes throughout the district, I don't think that there's an issue. That is my opinion. I'm not basing that on anything other than my knowledge of the district and just the map itself.
All right.
Travis Bailey, this is Travis Bailey, Mr. Chair. I withdraw my friendly amendment.
All right. So folks, here we are. We're at the point where we're going to vote on this motion, and I will go down the roll and call for a yes or no on this. And if the motion doesn't carry, then we'll come back to the question whether some motion more like what Travis said is what you really want, or whether the truth is for whatever reason, your concerns about Mosley Lane say that we can't do this. Gaston Williams, yes or no?
No.
Heather? Unmute yourself, Heather.
No.
All right. Ian Dunn?
Approved. Yes.
Denny McAuliffe?
Yes.
Jimmy Team?
Yes.
John Henshaw?
Yes, reluctantly.
Katie Pate?
No.
Jay Webb?
No.
Laurie Jackson?
Yes.
Nicole Alvarez?
Yes.
Travis Bailey?
Yes.
All right. Did somebody count all the yeses? The motion appears to carry. I will vote yes.
I heard 4 no's, and that would make 8 yeses.
All right. So the motion carries. And for the attendees, Ms. Blackburn, Ms. Locke, Ms. Nemec, Ms. Farmer, it's not that your concerns may not have validity, but they need to be addressed to the council and not to this body because of where the district lines are drawn and how we have to do our work. But thank you for coming, and we'll move on from there. I'm going back to the agenda now. Nothing on the right of way, nothing on demolition by neglect, and the next one is Hillcrest Cemetery. Is anybody here to speak on that matter, staff?
You skip the recombination.
Okay. That's what I was going to say. Real quick, I'm going to share my screen again.
I skipped over 1315 Oakwood Avenue, St. Aug's.
Correct. So I can't remember now. I think if either Colette or Aaron speaking, I've already forgotten, but let me pull up and share my screen on that matter. I lost it.
Could you speak to how this discussion is different from the discussion that we, and by that I mean recombinations versus subdivisions?
Yeah, I was actually going to do that just as you started talking. So this is a recombination. The difference in this review is that you are just looking at it. You have the authority to review, but you do not provide a comment or a recommendation or any kind of vote. So it feels a little silly, but we're looking at it. And that is, you can, I guess, make whatever comments you'd like, but those do not get sent back to the applicant.
So, if you don't mind, tell us what action is it that they're taking? What change?
There is no vote, no action. You just have to review it.
I understand our role.
Oh, okay.
What is the applicant trying to accomplish?
Sure. So, if Tanya, if you'll go back to the IMAPs. So this is St. Aug's campus. We are reviewing this because there, you can see at the bottom of your screen, 2 landmark properties included in this very large parcel.
Right.
They are making a few small changes, mostly which, if you look to the right where it says Fallcrest Court, right above Mary E. Phillips High, they are cutting off or separating out kind of where that Bridges Branch Creek is, with the 7 buildings kind of in a circle. Tanya, if we go to the proposed, that will become a 7th lot. That's just being separated from that main parcel, and that is the extent of the change.
Okay, you go back to the other picture. Okay, so the cluster in the on the Upper East Side is being made a separate lot.
Correct.
Okay, and our concerns primarily relate to the chapel and the old hospital site.
Yes.
Down at the bottom on Oakwood.
And it does not appear those are being impacted by this change.
All right. Any comment or question? I'm proposing to finish this discussion right now and move to the next thing.
May the record reflect we reviewed it.
Yes, that will appear in the minutes. So we have done our review on that, and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. And so I may have been ahead of myself, but we're now ready for Hillcrest Cemetery.
Okay, let me share that. Ian is going to do the presentation, but just a quick introduction, which is that this is the very first phase of the moving a landmark designation through the process. And Ian has the motion, and I'm there it is. I will share this. And okay.
So I'll just read off why this is significant. And Tanya, can you just go through the slides?
Sure.
Okay. Hillcrest Cemetery is a planned 20th century cemetery that served Raleigh's African American community during the racially segregated Jim Crow era through the present. I think the last burial there was in 2016. The cemetery is historically significant as the city's only known private cemetery that was developed and managed by African American entrepreneurs. The cemetery is also significant for its association with the Lightner family and Calvin Lightner, one of Raleigh's most prominent business and community leaders of the early 20th century. Hillcrest Cemetery was formally established in 1926 when brothers Calvin and Rayford Lightner purchased 60 acres on Walnut Creek. Although grave inscriptions indicate the land had been in use as a burial place since at least 1920. The cemetery was established by the Lightner family as a related venture to their Lightner funeral home, which the family had operated since 1911. The Davie Street Presbyterian Church and the Capehart Lightner House, the funeral home on MLK Boulevard, are the only buildings constructed by Lightner known to survive, which elevates the historical significance of Hillcrest Cemetery as a physical representation of Lightner's life. I think that's pretty much all I have to say. The cemetery also has some interesting folk art tombstones, as you can see here. And it has a lot of similarities to Oak Grove in method as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. You'll see by his motion, but just as a reminder, the steps for landmark designation are after this, it gets to go to City Council 3 times. First time, simply a request to send it to the state for review. Second time will be a joint public hearing. I have no idea how we'll manage to make that happen remotely, but we'll deal with that, cross that bridge. And then the third, presuming everything goes swimmingly, will be for actual designation. It will come back to RHDC one more time after the joint public hearing for you to consider any comments that were heard there. I also will point out that this is coming through as an application that is being sponsored by RHDC. The Friends of Hillcrest Cemetery reached out, and the research committee chose to use funds and hired an architectural historian who specializes in cemeteries, who did 2 reports, one a sort of a pre-landmark designation report to see if there was a possibility for significance, and then ultimately completed the landmark designation report that you had the opportunity to review online.
All right. So thank you for that, Tanya. So that's a motion coming from the research committee, and doesn't need a second. And since we're going to get several more cracks at this, I'm going to skip discussion and just call the roll on the motion to forward this to City Council from here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, can Ian read it so that we've got it, the whole thing?
Yes,
It'll be
ma'am.
really fast.
Yeah, Ian, go ahead and let's check out your reading skills.
Thank you.
The research committee has reviewed and discussed the application for Hillcrest Cemetery at 1905 Garner Road. On behalf of the committee, I move that the commission find that it meets the criteria for designation as a Raleigh Historic Landmark, and that the RHDC recommend to the City Council that the application be referred to the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Division of Archives and History for its analysis and recommendation to authorize a joint public hearing.
All right, you've heard the motion, and I'll call the roll. Gaston Williams?
Aye. Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Ian? What?
Yes.
Janine?
Yes.
Jimmy Team?
Yes.
John Henshaw?
Yes.
Katie Pate?
Yes.
You say yes?
Yes.
Kay Webb?
Yes.
Laurie Jackson?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
And Travis Bailey?
Yes.
And I vote in favor, so it carries unanimously, and that will move on to the council for dispatch to the state for study. So that takes us down to discussion items. Dix Park Community Committee application. What is that about, staff?
So this is the sort of in the next phase of the development of Dorothea Dix Park, a new, for implementation, a new community committee is being created, and there is the application period to sign up for said committee is open through July 17th, and I am bringing it forward to let y'all know it exists, and so you can discuss amongst yourself and decide if there's anyone in particular from RHDC that you wish to apply for the committee or not.
Right. Okay, well, we need to bird dog everything at Dix, in my view, and so I would encourage everyone to have that discussion, or to go ahead and put your name up. Don't wait to be asked. If you have, and if we have an interest, and I don't recall who on this meeting here had that particular interest, but we ought to be looking at that and not let that deadline slip. Because at any given time, if we're not at the table, things can happen to the historic structures audit deck. Are there questions or discussions from any of you?
Yes. So staff may need to answer this. So we created our own committee within RHDC to follow forward with that. And so I am confused now as to how this new creation and how our participation earlier are impacted or not impacted.
So that's a very good question, and one that I did ask. I know the last time that the commission's Dix Park ad hoc committee met with planning staff from Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources, there was the hope that there would be sort of liaisons from various groups. And it at this point, it does not look like that is following, that's not happening at this point. So while the planning staff will continue to answer questions of the commission and meet with y'all, the formal process of there being a committee is going to be through this sign-up committee. I did not say that very well at the end, but
we're going to have to make ourselves part of this committee and make that effort, because it won't happen automatically.
Correct.
Who else was on the at the meeting, the Dorothea Dix Park ad hoc committee meeting that we had? I know I was there.
I was there.
All right. So I think that it would be well for Jimmy and Gaston to...
Janine.
And Janine, okay, I couldn't see all the hands. I think it would be well for really everyone to put that application in and let's see what we get out of it, rather than us try to pick and then wind up with none of us. It's what my hope would be. So we don't have to do that right this minute, but we need to follow up with how we get to that application and get it done by the deadline.
And I think there's a key question for me, and maybe staff can answer this, is what's the expectation in terms of the time commitment for this new group?
It's in there. It's in it. If you go to the link, the application's there as well as your commitment description.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I don't remember. It's quite a bit, but it is spelled out on the link in the agenda.
All right. Well, all of you that were on that ad hoc, at least, and maybe some of the rest of you, ought to give it a shot. They're not going out of their way to include us. I think we have to understand that as part of our concern and caring for the issues that we all have to push. It won't happen if we don't push.
I do have, if somebody gets, just a real quick question, if somebody gets additional information as to why they changed their mind, because this is looking oddly, I don't know who's making this determination, but it's oddly, there's a great deal of demographic information in here that wasn't considered in our committee assignment that we thought we would be included on kind of automatically. I'd be interested to know how this bubbled this way. It looks a little regimented.
Yes. We're running along trying to keep up with the train, is in a nutshell.
And we expressed ourselves very clearly. We wanted to be not an engineer, but we wanted to be on the train. And, you use a better analogy than that, but we...
Yes. Okay. Next thing on the agenda is notification of elections. Tanya, when is it that we have to do this?
As soon as possible. You were supposed to be notified in April that it was going to come up, but it hasn't met. But I will also tell you that the nominations committee hasn't even pulled together who would be the officers for next time. So I just threw it.
Tanya, this is Kate. Yeah, the nominating committee has a proposed slate. I think what we have done in the past is we present it at one meeting and then we vote on it at the next meeting.
Are you prepared to propose that slate now?
Yes, sir, I am.
All right, then, folks, she will propose a slate now, and we will vote on it next month. And obviously, if somebody else wants to be included, I don't know who she's getting ready to put up, but we will deal with it next month. But let's hear it, because we need the nomination report anyway. So, Kay, why don't you talk about the slate internally, and then we'll talk about vacancies in the city council.
Okay. All right. The nominating committee proposes the following slate for officers. For chair, Nick Fountain. For vice chair, Kay Webb. And for secretary treasurer, Katie Pate.
All right. So you've heard the report. Those are the nominations. We're not voting now. If somebody would like to have a job, we can probably work it out for you. So that'll be on the agenda for next month. Now let's turn to committee reports, and I'm back to Kay Webb and nominations. And let's talk about what has occurred with regard to vacancies and nominations to the city council.
Okay, we have 7 vacancies that need to be filled, 4 of whom are reappointments, persons who are eligible for reappointment, and we are presenting those names to the city council to be reappointed. They are Travis Bailey, Ian Dunn, Janine McCullough, and Jimmy Teen. And that would leave 3 additional positions for new persons, and we have submitted the following names to the city council, and it's my understanding that hopefully they will nominate them at today's meeting and then vote on them at the July 7th meeting. They are John Reese, who is a resident of the Glenwood, Brooklyn Historic District. He's an architect and a proprietor of The Store, which is a rehabbed, renovated building in Glenwood, Brooklyn. Vershay Height, who is an architect with Vines Architecture, and she has specific interests and skills in cultural identity and globalization. And then the third person is Susan Singer, who is a resident of Oakwood, and she has a special emphasis on environmental preservation of the flora and fauna.
Okay, and so folks, when we checked the bylaws during this long hiatus, we were informed that the nomination committee was to provide those nominations to the chair, and the chair was to pass them on to the city council, and it wasn't something that had to sit and wait until we could have a meeting like we are today. So those names have already gone in, and we would have done it with more full discussion with everyone if we could have had meetings. And but we've moved it, and frankly, I think, though I don't know any of the folks, I think Kay has done a marvelous job as essentially a committee of one in getting us great nominees. Not that they will ever be able to equal those that may be departing this body, but nevertheless talented people. And furthermore, with skill sets that we can use and with connections to the historic districts, because 2 out of 3 are also representatives of the regulated community. So that's sort of where we are on nominations. We're going to get through this meeting pretty quickly. Community awareness, what is it that you all were thinking you were going to be working on before everything came to an abrupt halt?
Yeah, we were working towards May being celebrated as Preservation Month, and had a bike tour, history bike tour planned that we were going to be teaming up with a few other folks from the city and other organizations. So that definitely came to a halt, unfortunately, but we hope that we made some good connections so that we could try to do that next year.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We should be, and maybe we can pick it up and do it. But for our purposes, we need to be aware of that idea that's out there. Since Nicole, you're going off, right?
Right. Yeah.
And not that I don't think we were ever asked if it was okay for you to go off, but it's how the world's working at the moment. So we'll deal with it. But anyway, it's a great idea, and we need to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
Okay, the Lustron House. Let's see, Laurie, where were we on that?
I'm not sure if I have any new information be able to chime in. Unfortunately, I don't think we've made too much progress. It is still there. It still looks the same. We are working on getting the site cleaned up, getting the pieces moved to the site storage unit, and working with PNC to try and get it sold. We do have a realtor, and they are marketing the project. Tanya, did you have anything to add?
The only thing that I would add is that we, thanks to calls from neighbors letting us know what's going on, we've been sort of working with housing and neighborhoods to get the maintenance folks out there to clean up the yard. I haven't been by there to see if it's happened. I did hear that some glass some of the windows have been broken. And so that was supposed to get cleaned up, but other than that, there's nothing new. Okay. Anything from research? Well, that committee, we'll have to try to jumpstart it and get it back moving again, the Lustron, but that's the same with every committee, I think. Ian, anything else from research?
No, we haven't met, so I don't have any updates.
Okay. All right, well, hopefully we'll begin to get these things moving again on every committee, and that's why I wanted to take the time to have a couple sentences here. On the COA committee, we had our virtual last month, and it went till 8:30, I think it was, and we'll have another list this month, not quite as long, but we certainly will have some matters that are controversial. Maybe even more controversial than Mosley Lane. So that's what's going on there. We are going to take a look at what can we do, what should we do, and how do we organize to deal with folks who ignore what we said after we took the trouble to have a hearing and set conditions on them. And we'll address the concerns that and whether inspections really will do our work for us unless we hand it to them on a silver platter. But that's going to be there. And so at the next COA meeting, save 15 minutes at the end so we can talk about that part of our work, since we work so dang hard to get the decision right. So that's out there. Just be aware of it. Dorothy Dix, we already talked about. Anything from staff all the way down in item 9?
Nothing new at this point, no.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else that we need to talk about before we adjourn, folks?
I have something really quick. Due to the recent events, I've received some questions regarding the commission's stance on the initiative to remove the 3 Confederate monuments in the Capitol Square Historic District. And I understand that we don't have the authority to remove them. However, I'd like to open discussion about whether or not we want to issue some type of statement or reach out to council or the state commission to make a position known. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we could discuss it at our next meeting if desired, but I did want to bring that because I've received some questions about our position.
Understood. We will, how about this? We will put it under discussion items at the next meeting. If you look at your agenda, just as we talked about Dix Park, notification elections, we'll put it there. We'll have that discussion.
All right, great.
Thank you.
All
Thanks,
right.
Katie. Appreciate it.
Katie.
So anything else? If for those of you who are departing, we hope you'll still be here next month. We'd love for to be here for an actual meeting so that we can shake your hand and pat you on the back and thank you for everything. But we really appreciate all the time that's gone in. I think the people on this call know how much time is involved, maybe more than anyone else. And so on behalf of all of us and each other, thank you. And we will need to stick you back on a committee as advisory or whatever, because we don't intend to lose this talent. So thanks, everybody. If there's nothing else, Tanya, anything else?
No, sir. Thank you all.
Then I declare the meeting adjourned. I'm sorry it went to 9:15, but we're done. Take care.